Hello, Mexican American literature and culture. This is your teacher, Miss Alba, and today is Friday, May 8th, 2020. We've been on quarantine now for almost, oh my goodness, almost 2 months. This is true. But here we are. We are been studying this week La Llorona, and you may be asking yourself, Miss Alba, what is wrong with you? The reason why we've been studying La Llorona and the reason why we've been studying corridos is because much of Mexican American literature, specifically in the 20th and the 21st century, draws on the stories, not just of, obviously Mexican American writers are influenced by many different things, and they are mostly, obviously, influenced by their connection to a certain extent to the culture, and something deeply embedded within the culture is folklore. Every culture has folklore. Folklore is the way that we communicated ideas and philosophy and morals and rules throughout much of our history as human beings. And many of us continue to have that folklore. We don't often think about folklore as something that you study, but folklore should definitely be something that should be taken seriously as a topic of study, because that is where ancestral wisdom comes from. The stories, as absurd as they may be, as absurd and crazy as they may seem, whether the story is La Llorona or any other crazy story that your parents tell you or your grandparents tell you, there's some wisdom there. And so there's also a lot of history. Stories come about through a certain human need. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about why we've been studying La Llorona, and we're going to take a look at where we're heading. La Llorona, to a certain extent, is much like the corrido hero. I'm going to say that again. That might sound surprising, but La Llorona, as an archetype, as a pattern, holds many of the same qualities and characteristics as Joaquin Murrieta or Gregorio Cortes. I'm going to say that one more time. La Llorona holds many of the same patterns and characteristics as Gregorio Cortes or Joaquin Murrieta. So we are going to talk about that. Let me just begin with that. But before I go in depth with that a little bit more, I'm going to review what we've been doing this week. And we're going to tie it all together, because I don't want you to leave this week thinking Miss Alba, she's a crazy. Okay. So, we are going to, I'm going to share my screen so that okay, there you are. Okay, so here is what we did this week. I want to first of all thank you, those of you who came to catch-up meetings. I'm still open for those of you who are still want to get a passing and credit for this class. But okay, so on Monday we thought about what do we know about La Llorona and what do we want to know. We talked about, we read several different stories about La Llorona. We also learned about some historical facts about La Llorona. And today I'm going to kind of bring it together, and we're going to use that to start our reading for next week. So, La Llorona, here we go. Where does La Llorona come from? Okay, well, let's begin by starting with the following. Today what we're learning about is a term called cultural subversion. Cultural subversion, I'm going to say it again because it's important, this new term, subversion. We are going to notice how Mexican Americans subvert or overthrow cultural ideologies through the use of allusions, literary allusions, specifically through the cuento of La Llorona. Now, before this, again, you knew of the story. You had relatives tell you they've seen her, they've heard her, etc. Well, it's very strange that obviously she is everywhere and nowhere, because I can bet you haven't seen her yourself, or maybe you have, but you didn't tell me. So I didn't hear that in the storytelling circle that we created. So today, I'm here to tell you that the cuento de la Llorona, and you may have read this in the previous article, comes from this pre-Columbian, the roots of the cuento de la Llorona, of the folklore of La Llorona, comes from before the Spaniards arrived. There was a cult, a religious cult made up of women for the goddess Cihuacuat. Cihuacuat was the goddess of motherhood and fertility. She was associated with earth and water. And that makes a lot of sense, because motherhood, right? We are all born. Our mother carries us in her womb. And her womb is, they're in a water sack. The womb is earth, right? And so Cihuacuat was a mother goddess. The cult of Cihuacuat was a group of women before the Spaniards arrived, who protested the Aztecs' kind of imperial efforts throughout Mexico, the Flowery Wars. And during these Flowery Wars, what Aztecs did, and part of the way that they became such a large empire, is that they would gather up and basically enlist young boys who were not much older than you, and they would use them they would send them off to all over different towns throughout Mexico to basically just terrorize and wreak havoc on people that were not paying tribute to the Aztecs. Sometimes when those boys got sent out to towns like that to train them to become warriors in their training, they died. And mothers were very upset, because their boys and their children were being taken away for the sake of empire. And that sake of empire was not benefiting them in any way. And so what they would do to show their rage was that they would protest in front of, the buildings where the politicians the leaders would have been, who were making these decisions, and they would cry, "Oh, my children." Does that sound familiar? So these same women, right, these wails of mourning and rage and protest were also the wails and rage and protest of women who were protesting when the Spaniards arrived and again wreaked havoc and killed so much of the population of Mexico. And once again, these women were crying, "Oh, my children." This is where La Llorona comes from. So here you see, and obviously to Spaniards who were used to a different kind of mother, this would have appeared scary. Cihuacuat, you could see she's got a skeleton face. She's got hands, lots of allusions, but then there's water. Cihuacuat comes from the word cihuat, and then cuat. Cihuat comes from water, and then cuat means serpent. And so a serpent is the animal, represents earth, because it's the animal that lives closest to the earth, literally crawls on the earth. And so in this image here, skeletons, as much as they represent death, they also represent life. Because as soon as something is born, the one thing that's destined, that in their destiny, is death. And so motherhood and wombs and mother figures, life, in fact, is always represented with this image that would have appeared very scary to Europeans. But if you take a look at it, it's throughout Mexican culture, this image comes about. Because it's our connection to the earth. One day we will become dirt. You will become earth just as much as, a plant. So Okay, so let's talk about how that changed. So when the Europeans arrived, there became a new symbol of motherhood, and the figure that comes about in Mexico is Guadalupe, and it's also associated with earth and sky. So scholars also believe that she was a synthesis of religious beliefs. The arrival of Guadalupe and her appearance to Juan Diego, many believe was a way that indigenous people were able to hold on to their religious ideas as well. So La Llorona. So how does this bring us to La Llorona? La Llorona as a story does not begin until after Spanish arrive, after colonization. Her story is what she does wrong. Her first mistake is that she transgresses the boundaries of the casta system that we learned about in the beginning of the year. She breaks the rules. She is a lower class woman who marries, falls in love with someone who is from a different casta. The man, and a different, racial component to it too. The man leaves her because he sticks to his own caste, with his own kind. And so that enrages her, right? So she avenges herself through an act of infanticide. And because of this, right, the story goes, she haunts because she was punished for all eternity to scare her little children when their parents are too tired to put up a fight. So something I want you to think about here is, what are some of the differences between Cihuacuat and La Llorona? Cihuacuat, right? Cihuacuat and La Llorona. What are the differences, and what do you think caused the transformation of this figure? Okay, so now I'm going to ignore this part. We are going to spend some time or in the next week, we're going to, first of all, we're going to be analyzing this beautiful mural by Juana Alicia. It's beautiful. My goodness, I love this mural so much for so many different reasons. We're going to analyze next week this mural. We're going to see how this mural shows the influence of these, not only folklore, right, the allusions to La Llorona, but also the connection, how to a certain extent we could see that Juana Alicia is reclaiming the power of that woman, of Cihuacuat, that motherhood cult, where she is not just this crazy lady who killed her children, but in fact is really a story that we've forgotten, and that this woman was actually one point crying not because she killed her children, but because she was fighting for her children. And so we're going to take a look at how Juana Alicia does that, but we're also going to do that. You're going to, do an analysis. And then we're going to take a look at how we see this in literature. First off, we're going to read Woman Hollering Creek by Sandra Cisneros. And then we are going to compare Juana Alicia and Sandra Cisneros. And we're also going to read children's books. I'm going to read for you. So that'll be fun. Anyways, I hope you're well. Miss you so much. I can't tell you that enough. If you are still struggling with keep catching up, if you want to, if you're interested, I want to give a shout out to the students who've taken the opportunity to talk to me, who've communicated with me, and who've decided I want to take control again of this situation. And I don't want to have to complete this course later on. I want to be done with it when summer comes. I don't want to think about it ever again. And they've hung out with me and we've completed their work. I am more than happy to do that. I've been reaching out through email. I've heard from some of you I haven't. So that is all for today. Peace, and I hope you have a great weekend.